In this next section, what we're going to be doing is factoring trinomials like we were in the last section. It's just this time they have a coefficient, a number in front of the x squared, which does make it more complicated. One of the things I want to add to this set here is that we want to make sure that we factor out our GCF first. So number one really should be factor out your GCF. So every time we're going to look for that GCF, then once we do that, we'll make two sets of parentheses and we'll break it down. And we'll see if we can get the middle term by multiplying. So we might as well get started on this. First thing I'm always going to look for is that GCF. They don't share anything in common, so my next step is to make our parentheses. Why is this one more complicated? Well, before we were really only concerned with our last term. We only had to be concerned because the only factors in the first term was 1 and 1. This time we have factors for the first term. And why does that play a part? Well, before we just had x and x. So when we checked our middle and our outer terms, we were multiplying by 1. Well, now I actually need a 2x squared. The only way to get a 2x squared is with a 2x and a 1. So I'm going to have to write a 2x and an x inside of there. So the next thing I want to look at is I want to figure out how I'm going to put a 1 and a 2 in there. Those are the only factors of 2. So if I try to put 2 here and 1 here, and then I check my inner and outer terms, my outer terms give me 2x and my inner terms give me 2x. This is not going to be the correct solution because I don't want a 4x, I want a 5x. So what you're going to have to do is get your eraser out, erase it. You still want to use those same factors, those are the only choices you have, but you need to flip-flop them around. Look what happens when you flip-flop them around. Now you have 2 times 2, which is 4x, and you have 1 times 1, which is 1x. That gives you your 5x. You need a positive 1 and a positive 4. We need a positive 4 and a positive 1 to get us that positive 5. We're going to go on here. I will mention that the sign behind here was positive, so I needed positive, positive, or negative, negative. Because this was positive, I did put positive, positive in there. On the next part, we are looking at greatest common factor. There is no greatest common factor there, so I'm ready to make my parentheses. Factors of 6 are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Now typically, we're always going to try this 2n and this 3n first. Lots of time those are the factors we want when we factor, rather than the 6n and the n. However, 6n times n gives you 6n squared, and so does 2n times 3n. We don't really know which answer it's going to be until we check our last term. Our last term has factors of 1 and 7. I consider factoring like to be this little, some puzzle piece stuff that you're putting together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1 and 7 here. I'm going to check my inner terms and my outer terms. This gives me 3n and 14n. Well, 3 and 14 does not give me 23. So I'm going to have to try something else. Instead of jumping to different factors or jumping down to this one, before you do anything else, flip-flop those factors. So put the 7 there and the 1 there. Now you've got 21n, and here you have 2n, and there is your 23. See, 21 and 2 give you 23. How are we going to get a negative 23? Well, by putting a negative 21 and a negative 2. Negative 21 and a negative over here. That gives you your negative 2n and your negative 21n. And it also gives you your positive 7 on the end. Negative times negative is positive. So there's that plus sign. So we knew we needed positive, positive, or negative, negative. Because it was negative, we knew we needed minus, minus. This is the same problem we started with at the beginning. So I'm going to cruise through this real quick. I know it's 2n and n. I know I put 2 and 1 like this so I can get my 5. This time, though, I need a negative 5, so I would put in negative, negative. Minus, minus gives me the positive 2 at the end on my product, but it gives me a negative sum.